Welcome, everyone. We are here for the very first episode of the ASPEC podcast series, where we're going to be talking all things asexuality today. We'll be discussing some common misconceptions about asexuality in the ace spectrum. We'll be covering microlabels and whether or not we find them useful, and of course, ace memes.
Ace memes.
I am joined by Tito Nico.
Hello.
And I'll say it this way this time. UZ Worm.
Thank you. Yes, that's like I said. You get the Canadian pass. Most people aren't allowed to. Most people have to call me Ooze. You get the UZ pass.
I had to there. All right, so let's start with in alphabetical order with Petito Nico. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name's Petito Nico. I'm a variety streamer from Scotland. I'm a witch. Well, what else can I say about myself? I'm also asexual, but I think that kind of goes without saying.
One would think, given the topic of discussion.
You might have just found us on the street. You don't know.
I would be.
Hey, I want to be on a podcast. What's it about? Who cares? Just.
That's how Ty finds everybody. Just hey, do you want to be on a podcast?
Yeah, I just randomly approach strangers on the street. You want to join me on Twitch for a podcast about asexuality?
Yeah. Nico and I were out just sitting on the street.
Mm-hmm. In Colorado and
in
Scotland
Colorado
separately.
Yeah, just
neither of them Canada.
You get around.
And I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Well, howdy. I'm Oozeworm, also Ace. Not Arrow Ace, just Ace. I'm disabled, plural variety streamer. And as was mentioned, I'm from Colorado. Good
Perfect.
stuff. Also, howdy, K Shizzle.
Welcome on in, K Shizzle. Absolutely. Glad to have you here. And I am Tai Iwai. You don't know me. Gray Arrow Ace, non-binary from Ontario, Canada. And I run a IRL, or I help run an IRL Ace and Arrow discussion group once a month locally. And between this and the Ace and Arrow raid train that both Petito Nico and Oozeworm were a part of, it gave me a real good inspiration for bringing that online and talking about some of these very same issues here on Twitch, because I haven't seen that niche be filled before. So I think this is a really cool opportunity to talk about some things that, there's not a whole lot of discussion of on a regular basis. So I'm so grateful that you could join me today and chat about some really cool stuff.
Happy to be here. Otherwise, I'd just be on the street,
Yeah, same.
That's an ungulate, at least, Wild Sage. That's ongoing.
I haven't seen that meme in a long time. I'm a giraffe meme. I get it, because Colorado. I get it. It's one of two things anyone might say about Colorado: the I'm a giraffe meme or some South Park joke.
That is for sure. All right, so I think the first thing is probably the first order of business is kind of define what we're talking about when we mean what we mean by asexuality, and maybe delve into some of the common misconceptions around it. So if you look at the definition of asexuality as it is on AVEN or LGBTQIA plus wiki, it is folks who experience little to no sexual attraction, and that evolved from AVEN's original definition which was folks who don't experience any sexual attraction.
And then it grew from there.
Exactly, and it's become much more, all encompassing, and there's lots and lots of different micro labels if we choose to use them that fall under the ACE umbrella.
A lot of nuance.
Absolutely, so much nuance.
A lot
Absolutely.
of nuance and a lot of, because I'm an old man, probably some things I don't know about.
I can relate there on that. I'm about the same vintage as you.
Yeah.
And I'm younger than both of you.
That's good. You'll bring the youthful energy to the conversation.
That's why it's important to have lots of different perspectives, for sure.
You can tell us what the TikTok teens are up to or whatever.
Don't compare me to them.
I didn't compare you to them. I'm just saying you know what they're up to.
I don't think I do know what they're up to.
You're right. That's fine. I don't either.
And as somebody that has never used TikTok in my life, I certainly can't talk about what the TikTok teens are up to. So prior to this, unfortunately, discussions around asexuality were rather limited and often pathologized. And, going back to, 1800s, I was reading recently, there was, I think, a paper, Psychopathia Sexualis, described a term, anesthesia sexual, to refer to people with an absence of a sexual feeling.
Oh, we should bring that back. That rules, actually. I love
Anesthesia?
Yeah.
Anesthesia sexual. That's great.
It's kind of a wild term, not gonna lie.
I mean, it's still sometimes these feelings can still be pathologized nowadays.
Yes, and
Like in the DSM,
certainly.
in the DSM, DSM-5. I don't recall what it's called exactly, but you know how there's like different categories in the DSM, and one of the categories is disorders of sexual development.
Yeah.
And like one of those, for instance, would maybe be like gender dysphoria or gender incongruence, and then like etc. etc. One of these is very similar to asexuality. However, one of the caveats is that it has to cause you significant distress.
Exactly.
It can't, like, if you're fine with it, if you don't experience sexual attraction and you're fine with it, and this is just the way you are, then
That's
they're
just
like,
us.
yeah, you're fine.
Exactly.
However, if you're like, my lack of desire causes me genuine distress and like bad feeling in my day to day, then you can be diagnosed with this, because it's very similar in like libido, for example. You could just have a low libido, or you could have a low libido and be very distressed about it. And like that can still be like a mental health issue.
Absolutely. That's a really good point that you brought up. I sort of totally forgot to mention that. It is still, pathologized in many circles, unfortunately.
It is, but they at least removed it from the DSM.
That's important.
As a disorder in and of itself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm still stuck on anesthesia sexual.
Yeah, that's quite the term.
It just makes me think of that one Nicki Minaj line.
Sexual.
You can be like, you can start going by that today. No one can stop you. That's the great thing about being alive.
It is. I have to agree. That is an amazing term.
Although you would have to spell it differently, because some people spell anesthesia without an A, and some people spell it with an A. No, yeah. I don't mean at the start. I mean like in the N.
Well, I know you didn't mean at the start.
Yeah, no. At the start, there's always.
I know y'all in the UK and Canada spell things differently sometimes, but not that bad. Like,
yeah, we have our peculiarities here in Canada with spelling. I know that technically we follow the British way of spelling, but in practice I use a mix of both the US and British, and so my spelling is just all over the place.
Well,
I did notice, on the one
a lot of the American spellings are because of newspaper printing, because it cost per letter.
Yep.
So like that's why color, the U got removed. That's why in like a lot of words, and then also to do with like Z's and S's. I don't remember what it was, but it might have been that Z's cost, or no, Z's were like less or something. I don't remember. But that's why you spell like hospitalize with a Z.
Yeah,
spell
there's
it
a
with
lot
S.
of those for sure. I
Yeah,
tend to
that's
go
why
with the Z spelling.
that's why my username has a Z in it, because I'm American. But we just love our Z's.
If you were here, you would be Usworm.
Us worm. That's a U.S. worm, which would make more sense, really. I did notice on the little itinerary that you made for us, it does point out that favorability spelled with a U is a grammar error.
Yes, it's because the Microsoft Word wants me to spell the US way. Unfortunately.
Well, when did people start listening to Microsoft Word? Never.
Right?
Never in a million years.
So I usually just ignore it.
Yes.
There was another term, I think I was reading, used by a German sexologist at the end of the 1800s who used the term asensuality to describe her experience, but still very much in a psychopathological sense. So the book was entitled Psychological Bibliographical Study of a Contrasexual, though the title was actually in German. That's the English translation.
I'm a big fan of just the Kinsey scale and how it just labeled us as X.
Yes. And I think, there's some discussion that it's actually difficult to differentiate bisexuality and asexuality in some cases on the Kinsey scale.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it just goes from homo to hetero, so
Yeah,
that's not a lot of nuance. There's no split attraction in there. It's just homo to hetero
exactly.
sexuality, and then we're off on the side as X.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the 1940s, and then we come into the 1970s. And I think this is the first time I was reading that we start to see a clear distinction being made between libido and sexual attraction. So the Asexual Manifesto, written by Lisa Orlando, viewed asexuality through a feminist lens, but it still saw asexuality as a choice rather than actually a sexual orientation, strangely enough.
Well, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just happy that we have any evidence at all of people talking about asexuality before 2010.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I never heard it growing
So,
up
Kinsey
myself.
Scale, Asexual Manifesto, those are all, at the very least, some kind of discussion of it from olden times that we can look back on.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting to see how it's evolved, for sure.
Also, I do want to say, in regards to like discrimination, this is like not entirely unrelated, but it's related to asexuality. People who discriminate against asexual people are the weirdest people in the world. Like, people who discriminate at all are the weirdest people in the world. But also, you can make sense of discriminating against gay people. It's not good, but you can make sense of it. Because you can be like, no, they're different. Like, whatever. But if by these are closed-minded people, these people are not thinking about the nuances of asexuality. They're thinking about asexuals equals does not have sex ever. Why are you mad? Because I'm not doing something.
It is very bizarre. Very bizarre.
Yeah, because like it's bizarre anyway. Like, obviously.
I don't want to go into the minds of these people and find out.
For not doing stuff?
I think people just want an excuse to be mad sometimes.
Yeah.
They really do. They really do.
That's just kind of how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on the internet. Everyone just wants something to be mad about all the time.
And they want it to be an echo chamber where they can express their anger.
Mm-hmm.
And that echo chamber, Tumblr.
Yep.
Awful mistake of a website.
So I think the Kinsey scale was sort of built upon and updated in the late 70s to create a two-sided scale, or two axes rather than one axis. And this allowed, the concept of asexuality be, differ from, bisexuality. But again, asexuality was not used in the same way that it's used today, but at least this new Kinsey scale with two axes allowed you to more easily distinguish the nuance between the two.
Yeah, on the original one, the X didn't mean asexual; it meant no sociosexual contacts.
Yeah.
Which is a fancy way of saying asexual.
Yeah, but not using it in the same term that we use it today.
No, well, we have modern definitions now.
We do.
So
Thanks to Avon.
Thanks to AVEN
Yeah.
and others.
Yeah.
It's become modernized, and now we have new things to argue about.
Absolutely.
On the internet, I've always called myself like the base model asexual. Like I'm the one that you see when you go in the shop. Like because I don't have any microlabels. We're just ace, fully sex repulsed ace. Nothing fun or interesting. No bells or whistles. So I always do like hearing about people who are like gray ace, demi, their experiences, because we got no idea what's going on out in those worlds.
Definitely.
Like you've got ace flux written on the thing, and I have no idea what that even means.
It's a subcategory under the gray umbrella. And there's some similarities and some differences. So.
Okay, because I mean I know what demis are and what they do. I know agosexuality, what that is.
Yeah.
I think ace flux is more like it's like you might experience a period of feeling like completely ace.
Yeah.
And then you might go into a period of feeling like varying degrees. So maybe one day you feel like completely ace, and then maybe another day you might feel like gray ace.
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Something like that. Yeah.
The asexuality equivalent of gender fluidity.
Exactly, that's what it is.
Got it.
Yeah, very much so. So then we come to the online world finally.
Finally.
And, I'm skipping a lot. You can do a lot more reading on this, I think, than I did. But I think the first online blog that was out there dedicated to asexuality was named My Life as an Amoeba. Obviously, amoeba ring referencing the fact that amoebas are, reproduce asexually.
Mm-hmm.
And that was published in 1997, discussing the author's experience coming out as ace to friends and family. Yo, welcome on in, Laser Show. How's it going? We're just discussing asexuality and all things ace with Petito Nico and Oozeworm. We were talking about, the history of the term from the 1800s to today. And we're just discussing My Life as an Amoeba blog from 1997.
It's a very abridged history.
Absolutely. Very abridged because, you could spend an entire podcast on this alone. So this is the Cole's Notes version, I think, that I put together. I did not put together in an hour before the podcast today. Nobody heard that.
Hey, it doesn't matter how you did it if you get it done.
Right.
That's my life motto.
Yeah. And then we move to Yahoo, which references the blog. Yahoo group Haven for the Human Amoeba was formed in 2000. And I think if you remember back to early Yahoo groups, they were absolutely horrible for really
They were
large
awful.
discussions. And so
They
that,
weren't good for anything, discussions or
yeah,
otherwise.
and so that died pretty quickly. And out of the ashes, Aven, or AVEN, was born in 2001. And this is kind of where we start to really use asexuality in the context that we know it today. That's a little history of the term or definition of asexuality. Anything you either of you want to kind of add to that?
No, you clearly did more reading on this than I did.
Absolutely.
I do. I have a lot of knowledge of like the modern ace world.
Perfect.
I find I lack a lot of knowledge on the ace world of the past
Same.
because, and I think part of that is because of. I mean, we were discussing this slightly before stream, but part of it is because, like 40 years ago, it did not matter how you were different to a lot of people. It just mattered that you were different.
Yeah.
So if you were ace, you might. It's like how nowadays, the word gay, you could say that you're gay, and you could be ace, you could be bi, you could be anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
As long as you are not cishet,
Mm-hmm.
you can say that you are gay.
Yeah.
And
I do.
yeah, and then I think that it's very similar in that back then it was a lot more about finding community with the things that you could have. So it wasn't as much about like separating out people. And I think that's why it's like it's not as easy to find stuff from back then because it was just a lot of people going, we are all different. We are all here.
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
it's moving forward like the larger group. And then like nowadays, for example, like for instance, we moved forward the larger group. Now gay people can get married. You know? Like, and then we're still trying to move forward, like, over and over again. You know?
Yeah.
It's trying to move forward it bit by bit so that we can help lift each other up.
Absolutely. And that's so important that you bring that up. And I think, also the term, I always thought that the term, or at least the reclaimed term queer, kind of was the broad umbrella term. But I do also see gay being used as kind of a broad umbrella term as well to describe the 2S LGBTQIA plus community as a whole.
Especially because a lot of like older people don't necessarily feel comfortable using that word.
And very understandably so. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's also like yeah. And also there's a lot of like loaded stuff behind calling yourself queer because sometimes if for instance I know people who have told people in their life that they are queer and the people in their life have gone, oh, I thought that wasn't an okay word to say. Now that I know that it's okay to say, I'm going to say it to everybody. And that's not okay. So
No.
so then a lot of the time people will call themselves like gay because gay, as far as like most people go, it's not really an offensive term. I mean, it can become that, but as far as most people go, it's not a particularly offensive term, which means that if a lot of people are calling themselves gay, then it's like, okay, that's fairly safe.
I will argue,
You
though,
know?
that growing up in my generation, it was very much used in a bad way.
Mm-hmm.
It was.
Yeah.
When I was in high school, it was pretty bad.
Yeah.
See, because
I,
nowadays, in my generation, nobody cared. Nobody cares if you're gay. Nobody cares if you're queer. However, they did care if you were like trans, or if you were ace, or if you use any kind of micro label. So like if you were
Yeah.
pan, if you're
Yeah.
non-binary. Although I do know that a lot of like, especially post like being like 16. I think 16 was where most people in my at least school, but my school was a very small school, so it's a very different situation where everyone already knows each other. It's not like you can see someone across the room and be like, haha, you, I'm going to pick on you. It's like, no, because if you pick on them, you're picking on someone you've known since you were 3. So you can't really do that. But like when we were 16, it's like, no, like everyone in my school called my best friend at the time they them and called them by their name. Everyone called me Nico, called me he him. Like nobody really, everyone kind of stopped caring. in high school, and it kind of became more about like whoever was the quote unquote weirdest,
Mm.
which in a lot of cases isn't the person who's gay, but often is.
See, that's why I just use the label for myself queer, because I'm like, you don't need to know anything about me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Just know something's different.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah, I use queer in spaces around like new people.
Yeah. I've used that too.
If I'm in a queer space,
Hmm.
I will go into the intricacies of my identity sometimes.
Yeah.
However, if I am just around people, I will call myself queer because their reaction to me just calling myself queer, because I'm already pretty visibly queer. I'm not like, if I passed a bit more, I think I would probably just say I was gay.
Mhm.
However, because I do not pass that much, I will call myself queer, and their reaction to that, if they say, "Oh, you're queer," because you see it a lot with like a lot of people nowadays, is that you can be gay without being queer, but not logistically, not like literally, but I mean in terms of queer.
Aesthetically.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like queer is its own community,
Hmm.
and you can be gay and not engage with the queer community at all.
Absolutely.
Which is why I will refer to myself as queer, because if I refer to myself as queer, that kind of signals to people that I'm part of that community.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've done that before myself as well.
Sort of things where you get the right wing gays and the turfs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly. Very much so.
And no one likes them.
No, absolutely not.
No.
No space for that.
I don't even think they like themselves.
Well, probably not. If they liked themselves, then they probably wouldn't spend all day on the internet complaining.
Exactly.
Very true. Very, very true.
It's very different from me spending all day on the internet complaining.
Yeah, but I don't complain about other people. I just complain in general.
Yeah.
Same. I do that a lot. Usually it's
Complain
me
about other
ranting.
people.
Yeah.
There's plenty of things to complain about.
Yeah. Lots. Lots of things to complain about.
Complain about video games and Twitch ad breaks.
Yes. Like the one we're just wrapping up now. Thank you for putting up with the ad break. Welcome back. We were just complaining about complaining.
Complaining about complaining. That's a podcast idea.
Episode 2.
Just don't pick. Just throw a dart at a board and then complain about something for
Oh, I love
2 hours.
I could like find anything to complain about.
Absolutely.
And then just complain about the Twitch ad break whenever it comes up.
Hmm.
Which, because it's Twitch, is like every 5 minutes.
It really is. And I get the weirdest ads. Sometimes they'll show me ads in French that I can't even understand. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Is it because I'm located quasi-adjacent to Quebec that you think I can speak French?
Hold on, I've got an emote for just this situation. There we go.
I went to Italy for literally like 5 days in January, and I'm still getting Italian ads.
What?
It's gone down a little bit. Some of my ads are now like back to English, back to UK ads. But I'm still getting like a good portion of ads that are just full Italian language ads.
That is
And I'm
scary.
just like, I'm not in, because like I understand why it's doing it because I was on Twitch
Mhm.
mainly. Like it's not that I was like, it's not like it was looking at my ads. It's that I was in Italy
Mhm.
and I obviously was getting Italy ads because it localizes your ads
Yeah.
on your mobile.
Yeah.
But it hasn't quite adjusted to the fact that I'm back in Scotland.
I mean, this is good. It means someone's wasting their money,
Yeah.
Mhm.
which
Absolutely.
I'm all in favor of.
Me too. Absolutely.
This is how capitalism is dismantled, by playing the wrong ads
Mhm.
in
By
different
going to
countries.
Italy for a week.
By going to Italy for a week. This is how you can convince yourself your vacation is praxis.
Yes. Win. All right. Do you want to talk about, you know, microlabels and do you want to go with microlabels first, or do we want to kind of talk about some of the broad categories under
I feel like you start broad
asexuality?
and go more.
I think so. That's what my supervisor always tells me.
That's what your supervisor always. All right.
All right. So, under the umbrella of asexuality, there's, a few kind of broad groups. One of the big ones, demisexuality. Uh, that is essentially describing the experience where you don't feel sexual attraction until you develop a close emotional bond with a person. And unfortunately, demisexuality gets a lot of hate because people are just frankly assholes.
Say a lot of people are like, oh, isn't that normal? Because they think of like, the whole like movie trope of like falling in
Yeah,
love with your childhood best friend.
yeah,
People are like, isn't this normal? And I'm like, first of all, they're all normal, but sure. You mean like regularly occurring like all the time? And I'm like, okay, then why is hookup culture so prevalent?
hmm hmm
Because if this was normal, and I mean like base level, because that's clearly what they mean when they mean normal. They mean
yeah,
this is most people.
yeah.
Um, but if this is most people, why do people hook up? Like, why do people kind of like why? How can people like see someone on the street and be like, "Damn," right? That's that that's not demisexuality, right?
Absolutely.
But people want to see it all as just like, oh, but that's just normal. It's like when you speak to older people, and it actually gets quite sad speaking to older people, um, about bisexuality, and they're like, oh no, everybody feels that way towards the same gender. They just need to suppress it, and it's like, no, everyone does not feel that way about the
No,
same gender. Everyone does not need to suppress it.
no.
That's just you.
People are assholes about demisexuality. Also, because I was on Tumblr when this was going on. There was a rumor by a particularly notorious bad user on there that they had invented demisexuality. This was a user by the name of Factual Wiley, which, if anyone was on Tumblr back in the like 2014, that name might send you into certain shockwaves because they were rather notorious, and they claimed that they had invented it on some roleplay forum one time, and the story was completely false. But because at that point in time, anyone was looking for any reason to give shit to ace people, everyone was like, "Aha!" That's what. But honestly, I never really found that to be a compelling story anyway, because I'm like, well, everything had to be invented somewhere.
Yeah,
If a term was invented because it described someone's experiences, it doesn't matter if it was invented on a role play forum or if it was invented in a scientific paper. If people like it and use it,
it's all got to
Yeah,
start somewhere, irregardless.
yeah,
yeah,
I
and
think
also
I feel like some people still. I feel like everyone's like forgotten Factual Wiley's name and stuff like that, but I feel like that story still kind of pops up every so often
It certainly
about how
does.
demisexuality was invented in 2013 on a roleplay forum,
I've
so
but
definitely
it's
who's
heard
saying
of.
wrong.
that
Yeah,
and also who's saying that scientists would have come up with a better name for it? There's a scientist who there was bug scientist who invented the Sonic the Hedgehog gene.
yeah,
And
Like
it's a good name for a gene.
it's a good name for a gene when it's in
great.
bugs.
Yeah,
However, there's like a deadly mutation that can exist in humans over that gene. And it was funny when it was just in bugs, but now doctors are having to explain like to people that they have a deadly mutation in their Sonic the Hedgehog gene. So maybe I don't think those bug scientists should be allowed to name should be allowed to name genes anymore. Just saying.
Damn.
unfortunate.
I feel like
Absolutely
that brings some
unfortunate.
levity to the appointment if the doctor told me that I had a mutation in my Sonic the Hedgehog gene.
Yeah, well, because like
True.
all of the genes that were like all of that specific like sequence or whatever, they were all named after different species of hedgehog. So one of them would
Mm,
have been called, I don't know any species of hedgehog, but like something hedgehog gene,
yeah.
You
etc.
do know what you do know one. You know Sonic.
Yeah, but he's not.
That's a species of
No, but,
hedgehog.
but someone else went. Someone went. Haha, you know what would be funny? Sonic the Hedgehog gene.
Yeah, Shadow the Hedgehog. That's another
Mhm.
species.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Silver hedgehog. And yeah, we're going to discuss, the fact that there's a real misconception between attraction and action, and how people always try to conflate the two when it comes to attacking asexuality. And I think we're going to get into that a little bit more in one of the future questions, but that is an instant ban.
Want to become famous?
Where was I? I was talking about, we're going to talk about the constant conflation of the two, action versus attraction. And there are ace folks for whom they'll have zero attraction at all, and potentially for the benefit of their partner, have sex, for example.
Yeah.
Still doesn't mean they're attracted to somebody sexually, but they'll, for the benefit of their partner, be sexually active. It doesn't negate the fact that they're asexual.
Like we were talking about before, you can do stuff without wanting to do it.
Yeah. I mean, not even like not wanting, not as in like not wanting, just as in not wanting, as in not specifically
not interested necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we had just done talking about demisexuality.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we'll be on gray sexuality now.
Exactly. So I see this in two kind of broad, or two categories. I see this as a specific microlabel in itself, and I see it as a very large umbrella under asexuality. So gray sexuality in its current definition are folks that experience some sort of limited sexual attraction. So it's not that they don't experience sexual attraction at all, it's that umbrella that experiences limited sexual attraction. It can be used as a microlabel of itself, but I use it kind of as an umbrella term to describe the fact that I feel limited sexual attraction, but I don't really know a good way of explaining that. So I just sort of will sometimes say gray ace, or I'll flip-flop and back and forth with ace spec.
Well, there's a lot of queer identities like that where you just, I don't really know how to describe this, so we'll just make up a word for that.
Yeah, exactly.
And also there's, actually no, we're going to talk about that later, so I'm going to say that later.
Definitely.
Ignore what I said.
Good little preview for the future.
Yeah, little teaser for the future.
Yeah. And then we've kind of delved into ace flux a little bit.
Yeah.
But like ace version of gender fluid.
Exactly. So you fall within the ace umbrella, but at different times you may feel different intensities of sexual attraction under the ace umbrella. At some points you might feel completely with no sexual attraction at all, whereas other times you might feel you're more of a gray sexual, but it all sort of still falls under the ace umbrella. And as both of you mentioned, it's sort of like the gender fluid of asexuality in that regard.
And that leads us nicely into agos.
Exactly. And this one I've had many discussions about how to pronounce this correctly. I personally go with egosexuality too, because I think the way that it's kind of where it comes from is the Latin term ego, of oneself. So without oneself is sort of where they're going, or sexual without oneself. So I pronounce it egosexuality, but many people pronounce it agosexuality.
In fairness, I don't pronounce anything right ever.
Yeah, and I don't know what the correct way is.
So who knows?
I don't know either what the.
You can usually just look at how I pronounce something, assume that's the wrong way, and then try something else, and that'll be correct.
Yeah.
Given that it comes from ego, I would guess it's something like ego or ego. I like in my brain pronounces it ego or like ego-sexual, but that's because of the aegis, which is the shield that Athena carries.
Yes.
But that is Greek. That is not Latin.
Yeah.
So.
True. Yeah.
I mean, you could have fooled me if it was Latin or Greek before you told me that. Honestly.
That's because they're really connected.
Yes.
Yeah. They are very close. The two regions in which they arose are geographically close to one another.
It's either way, no matter how you pronounce it, at least it's shorter than the old name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
which was a whole mouthful.
Yeah. And had very bad connotations as well.
Yes.
Should I mention what it is?
I mean, if you want to, it's it's kind of similar to like an Asperger's thing.
Yeah.
To where it was a problematic.
Yeah.
Naming convention for something.
Yeah, I'll briefly say it arose from autochorus sexuality, and at the time was used in a pathologizing way, and so the community has said no to that, and many folks much prefer the term aegosexuality.
I'm just glad that we landed on something eventually.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Because there was about a 2-year period there were just like arguments anytime someone said either one of the two.
Welcome on in, Huckster Duke. Huckster Duke has followed us all along from the Ace and Arrow raid train, which we all three of us participated in back in June, and that was an absolutely amazing time. So glad to see you here today. This was that was one of the sources of inspiration for this podcast. Unfortunately, a lot of, and we were talking about this in the very beginning, asexuality was originally described in a pathologizing way, and it wasn't until the early 2000s that we started to use it in the modern context as a, sexual orientation. So unfortunately, there's a lot of examples of pathologizing of asexuality all throughout history, and it continues to be in many ways still pathologized, unfortunately. At least as Nico said, it's been removed as from being a disorder in the DSM-5. So yay for some progress.
We never actually gave the definition of ego.
All right, yeah, thanks for the reminder.
It's sexuality without oneself.
So I've seen a few different ways of it being described. There's a disconnect between oneself and the subject of arousal. So some egos may find that they experience sexual attraction or arousal in response to some external stimuli, but have no desire to engage in a sexual relationship. Or they may enjoy the idea of a sexual relationship in theory, but not actually desire to be in one.
And a lot of that's connected also to people who are ace and have fetishes, which people don't understand.
Yeah.
Very frequently.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also like, I know a lot of asexual people will really enjoy reading like lewd books and playing NSFW games. But people can't fathom that it's like, oh yeah, I actually don't want that in real life. I just enjoy playing the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
But people can't like fathom that. And I'm like, okay, some people play shooter games. That doesn't mean that they want to, go do that to people in real life. Like, that's common sense.
Yeah. And some ace folks I know are like the crudest folks I know on the planet and make like the most frequent sexual jokes of any people I know. Again,
I think that's a universal experience.
Yeah.
I know this because I am the ace who makes the crudest jokes that people know.
I make crude jokes until someone accuses me of making a crude joke, and then I go, "Who, me?"
Oh no, we double down.
I'm like, "How dare you? I would never do that. I'm just a little guy."
So valid. I have been known to partake in many crude jokes over time myself.
There's a reason my Twitch channel has a long running joke about just screaming about getting banned from Twitch every damn day.
There is a very good reason why my channel is 18 plus on Twitch. For that exact reason. Yeah, the jokes are funnier if you're ace because you don't actually experience it yourself, but so it can actually be absolutely hilarious.
Is that old Tumblr post about how artists fuck better? Ace people joke about fucking better.
So true. And I think this is kind of a good point to come to. So we talked broadly about some broad categories under the umbrella of asexuality and what I'd argue is the umbrella of gray sexuality. And this kind of brings us to the question, to label or not to label. So are microlabels helpful, and when are they and when are they not? And personally, do you find them helpful for your own experience? I've flip-flopped back and forth.
Out of my depth.
Yeah.
I requested this topic, so I got it. I got this.
I'm so glad you could be. Oops, sorry.
No, carry on.
I was going to say, so glad you could make it, Busby. So glad to see you.
Busby! Hello.
Busby's was part of the Ace and Arrow raid train as well.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I think that in regards to microlabels, it can kind of help you understand yourself a little bit more deeply. So for instance, if you're like, I know I'm something, but I just want to understand myself to a deeper level, that can be really helpful. And also to connect to others who might have like a similar experience.
Absolutely.
So like there are people under one microlabel who might completely not relate to someone under another microlabel. So it can help like join people together. But they can be really unhelpful when people try to label you.
Yes.
So, like, for instance, I've been in spaces where I've just called myself Ace. And technically, I'm probably Grey Ace or Demi or something, but thinking too much about it causes me a headache, and I just prefer not to. But for some reason, like, a lot of people have in these conversations, and, like, luckily that hasn't happened too much recently, but that's most of the time because I shut it down. And I say, no, I just go by Ace.
Yeah.
No, I just say I'm Ace. But sometimes in that situation, I've said, oh, I just go by Ace. Technically, I'm probably something else, but I just say I'm Ace because I don't like thinking about it too much. Whatever. And then they go, no, you're not Ace. You're either Demi or Grey Ace. And I'm like, you don't really get to decide that for me.
Why do people have to gatekeep the fuck out of everything? It is so infuriating.
Again, this is why I normally just call myself either queer or just Ace, because I'm like, I don't need to talk to you about anything.
Yeah.
And then there's like, and also there's people who don't feel quote unquote fully Ace. Obviously, they're all fully Ace. But I mean, like, there are people who don't identify as like fully asexual, who don't not experience sexual attraction full stop, but they don't know what microlabel to use. And then they just end up not engaging in community because they want to use the wrong label.
Yeah. All so valid.
Because sometimes people will join a community and they'll be like, oh no, I don't know if I'm meant to use Demi, or if I'm meant to use Grey Ace, or if I'm meant to use this, or if I'm meant to use that. So they just avoid engaging altogether for fear of getting it wrong. Meanwhile, if we go, they're all under the same umbrella. You can call yourself whatever you want to. don't need to have it all figured out.
Absolutely.
Because like I like micro labels. I think anyone who wants to use them should use them.
I agree.
But when you kind of impose that onto other people, that's really unhelpful.
Absolutely.
Because for some people it makes them feel more connected to themselves. For some people it's just indifferent, right? Like if I call myself Grey Ace, that doesn't feel more right to me than the word ace does.
Mm-hmm.
If I call myself Demi, that doesn't feel more right to me than the word ace does.
Mm-hmm.
And the word ace, I feel, expresses myself a little bit more fully.
Yeah. Nobody is as rigid as a box, and that's what micro labels are. They don't
Yeah.
allow for the nuances that exist within the experiences.
Yeah. Well, because like, it's like, for example, of like, how many sexualities are there in the world? Well, technically, there are as many sexualities as people, because
Exactly.
everybody has a slightly different experience. I, as a trans man, might have the exact same feelings towards my gender and the exact same experience as a cis woman. However, this cis woman might not feel a need to transition.
Mm-hmm.
But like, but yeah, but everybody's like slightly different, and I feel like the need to like label people when they didn't ask for it is not needed.
So valid and absolutely true.
I suppose it'd be easy to dig into the minutia of yourself and use microlabels if you wanted to. I've never been interested, maybe in part because it's very complicated going on in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially since there's two of us, which makes it complicated. We're different genders, which makes it complicated.
Absolutely.
So if I was to start using microlabels, I'd end up with like a paragraph. So again, just easier to use umbrella labels for us over here.
I can definitely relate to both of what has been said by both of you so far. I would say that initially I started using micro labels to try to figure out where under the umbrella I might fit. I know that I'm under the gray umbrella somewhere somehow. I I can say that I am might could very well be a ego. I'm not 100% sure. So at this point, I just say fuck it and I say ace, spec, or gray. Just to say that I'm somewhere under the umbrella. I don't really know and I don't personally care. But those labels were helpful at first when I was first coming to learn about my identity.
And
I feel like
also,
just using a spec is useful.
and also, this is something that I definitely like. I noticed an absence of it, a good absence of it, in the Arrow Race like raid train, and in a lot of newer Arrow Race spaces that I've seen. However, when you're in a space, for some reason, people have a desire to know what you are and exactly how they can categorize you. And I've started just going into those groups, and if someone like is so obsessed with finding out exactly how I relate to my asexuality and exactly how I relate to my gender, I'll just be like, it's not your business.
Is
You're
not.
not the one who has to live with it. Because like when in the Arroways raid train, nobody was asking, oh, exactly how are you asexual? How much sexual attraction do you face? How aromantic are you? How do you feel about this? Meanwhile, like people for some reason in other spaces think it's fine to do that. And I'm glad that did not creep up in the Arroways raid train. And
Absolutely.
I'm so glad
We're
about
respectable people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
understand. We understand. We get annoyed enough when other people do that. We're not going to do that to each other.
Well, because like I will happily explain things to people. I will happily explain things to ignorant people. Like my family members, who I'm the only queer person out of all of them. I will happily explain that to them. However, if you have full access to the internet and you know which questions to ask, and you are only asking me because you think it will push my buttons when you ask me, then you're not asking that in good faith.
No, absolutely not.
Because that is pretty common that you will see in spaces especially like queer spaces, leftist spaces, etc., you will see someone comes in and asks a question, and when someone else reacts with hostility to that question and goes, hey, you clearly aren't asking this question in good faith, then this person will go, how dare you? I was definitely asking this question in good faith. Even though you weren't. You weren't asking that question in good faith. Because if you were, you would have Googled it.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone ever asks, like, what are you, and they're being hostile about it, just say, I'm fucking tired.
Yeah.
That is a
That's
very
what I am.
valid mood.
Well, cause like I'm very happy to educate, but also it is not my job to educate. I educate because I choose to. I do not
Exactly.
educate because it is my job to. If I'm on the internet and somebody asks me about my queerness, I can very easily say, here's a resource that you can go and look at. Go and Google that. If I'm too tired. However, I educate because I choose to, and it should never be anyone's responsibility to feel like they should have to educate everybody who comes into their community.
See, I'm a very hostile educator.
Uh-huh.
Like even if people don't want it, I will educate them on it. People used to call me, like in real life, friends used to call me Professor Ace for that reason, because I would just be the loud. I was the only asexual anyone knew in like the mid 2010s, so I would just loudly make sure everyone was aware of what was going on, no matter what. I have a very, very limitless supply for dealing with nonsense.
Because, like, for example, I have my real life friends who are queer but are not. They're kind of vanilla queer. They're gonna hate that I said that.
Vanilla queer.
What
They
does that
are-
even mean?
there's a micro label that no one wants.
None of them like go by any microlabels. They're not really super well versed in like queer community, because they're not very online. So they like know what trans means, they know what bi means, they know what pan means, etc. However, they're not really super well versed on like the intricacies of microlabels, or for instance, how you can be any sexuality plus ace at the same time.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy to talk to them about that because they ask
Yeah.
in a respectful way. I'm very happy to talk to my family members about that because they ask in a respectful way. If I am in the middle of like a stream session and someone comes in and goes, hey, what does asexual mean? I will happily explain that to them. However, if somebody then proceeds to ask me some really invasive questions, I'm going to be like, hey, get out.
None of your business.
You don't get to come and sit here because I open up my space to educate people who are respectful towards me, and if you cannot handle being respectful for 5 minutes while you ask a question, then you do not deserve my education.
Exactly.
And then on the other side of that spectrum is us, who like go out in public during Pride Month wearing ace stuff and just talk to strangers about it.
Same.
And often get disrespectful questions about it and just be like, well, that's not a normal thing to say to someone, is it now?
Yes.
Then they look all embarrassed.
I can say that at one of the local Pride festivals here, I had somebody come up to me, start absolutely berating me about how can you know that you've never experienced sexual attraction and you'll never experience for the rest of your life? How do you know that you'll never want a relationship? I'm just like, I'm just a person wanting to exist. Why does this bother you so much? Some people.
Again, you just have to have that limitless supply for dealing with bullshit like I do.
Yeah, and I would say that I am not the most confrontational, and that's where it sometimes gets me into trouble because I don't have that ability to just say fuck off easily.
It's one of the perks of being a large, loud man.
See, I don't.
I can do that.
I struggle to do that in person, but I find it very easy to do online.
Oh yeah, like I just.
It's much easier online because they're not like there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
the thing is because in person, I'm 5'2". I'm little. I am not very physically imposing. I'm 5'2" and disabled. So in person, I always worry about going into queer spaces. not like queer bars. There's a queer cafe in my area. I'm very happy to go to those places. But like, for instance, Pride, I don't think I would have felt comfortable going to Pride alone. I went with my friend and their parents because if I had gone alone, I would have been worried.
Mm-hmm.
Or like there was a turf rally in my city a few months ago, and everyone that was going to protest it, and I was going to, and I decided not to because my friend could not make it, and it was advised, do not go alone, take
Mm-hmm.
a different route home, wear a mask
Mm-hmm.
so that they cannot photograph you and they cannot follow you home. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to go. But then even after it was over, I went shopping in my city and I had forgotten that it was happening. And I passed by a lot of people with like suffragette colors and suffragette flags, and I was like, I don't feel safe.
No.
I don't feel safe in my
No.
own city that I live in. So
Yikes.
I think that's part of the reason why I don't tend to educate people I don't know. Like, or like for instance, I didn't march for Pride or whatever. I went to a little like there was a little event later that I went to, but I didn't like march at Pride because I find it very easy to be unsafe in situations because of a lot of my intersectionality.
So
I mean,
low.
I'm disabled too, but most of the disabilities are invisible, so you can't tell when the 6'2" 240 guy stands up and looks at you
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
that my joints don't actually work. So I can look intimidating, and that's more than half the battle, really. It's like I've got my own attack dog energy.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
struggle with, confrontation in person. Um, usually the fact that I present, mask, does give me an edge, but I am not very good at confrontations for the most part.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, why does it bother somebody so much that they had to question me for 5 straight minutes about how I could dare to know that I'll never have sexual attraction for the rest of my life? And why does it fucking matter to you that much?
Yeah.
You just gotta have someone like me that you can call.
Although
Luckily,
Show up and
yeah,
when it's
diffuse.
isolated, I really love like when it's like a singular person or whatever, or when it's somebody who genuinely does not know any better. So when I was in college, I had met a few people who like who genuinely just did not know any better, and they were very isolated. Um, However, you can not know any better and also be bigoted, you know?
yeah,
Like both things can be true. So it wasn't like my family. Like my family are very like, I'll accept you. I just have questions. Meanwhile, this person was like, I have no idea, therefore I'm not going to accept it. And I was like, why do I take up so much space in your brain? I'm just
right,
existing. Why
right.
do I take up so much space in your brain?
That is the exact reaction I had with this person at Pride. It's like, why do you care so much? Why is my existence bothering you that much?
I don't try and get into the brains of people like that.
That is valid.
I feel like it wouldn't be a pleasant time to try and do that.
No.
How to scare an aphobic person.
Like
I'm gonna
slog
go
you
and
through a swamp.
I'm gonna go and not have sex. Oh, it's terrifying.
I enjoy anything where I don't have to do something.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
welcome on in, Nando. Good to see you.
Sex or otherwise, I enjoy any situation where I can feel like I'm accomplishing something by not doing anything. I went out to the bar, didn't get laid. See, then cope.
Win.
Also, the thing is that people like me, they're like, I don't want you to reproduce. And I'm like, okay, why do you hate that I'm ace then? You don't want me to reproduce? Congratulations! That's not happening.
Have I got some wonderful news for you if you don't want me to reproduce?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Some people. All right, so how easy was it for you to come to realize your ace identity?
I feel like it took me a while,
Mm-hmm.
only because again, I'm old enough that I didn't really know what asexuality was or had ever heard of it prior to graduating high school. And then I got to college
Mm-hmm.
and started using Tumblr, and they weren't
Mm-hmm.
particularly kind to ace identities on
Mm-hmm.
Tumblr. So that was also confusing. It took a while. It was basically after I heard about the split attraction model that I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's what happened. Now I understand, because we are bi or pan romantic,
Mm-hmm.
even if we're asexual. So it was always like, well, I'm attracted in some ways to people.
Mm-hmm.
However, every time we've attempted to have sex, it has gone horribly wrong.
Yeah. Very much relatable.
But yeah, I still feel like I was the first ace person anyone I know knew,
Yeah.
because I figured it out in like the early 2010s, which was it was somewhat rare for people to be out and about asexual in the early 2010s. Like, it was
Yeah.
long before Pride events had ace flags.
Yeah. I never heard the term until the late 2010s myself. And that's when I started to be like, this might ring a bell. This might explain my experience. And it really wasn't until 2019, 2020 that I finally put it all together. And I'm like, oh, wait, that's me. So I came to it very late, so to speak, myself.
I figured out I was ace in a very like anticlimactic way. Most of my coming outs were very just kind of extremely anticlimactic. It's very funny how anticlimactic they were. Because I was in secondary school, so I guess like middle school would be like the American equivalent. Um, and I like read about being ace because I was in a lot of like queer spaces and I had queer friends. Read about it. I went, huh, sounds like me. And then I just kind of went to bed. I was on holiday, and I was like, cool. And then I went to bed, and then woke up the next morning and was like, sure. Um, but then in terms of like the society that I live in, or like coming out as ace, my own personal community, I don't tell people I'm ace unless I'm particularly close with them. So like my best friends know I'm ace, my online friends know I'm ace, but that's not because I feel the need to tell them. That's because I like engaging in ace community online.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it doesn't really affect my life all that much because of the fact that I still have the desire to be in a relationship with someone. And like I think that if I was arrow ace, I probably would bring it up more, given the fact that, for instance, I have family who would love to see me in a relationship. I think that if I was arrow ace and I said I was arrow ace, that my family would be like, yeah, okay, that's not happening. But I, like, for instance, my grandmother does not need to know that I'm ace because I still plan on being in a relationship at some point. And my grandmother doesn't need to know if I experience sexual attraction or not. You know? Like, that's not her business. She doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think if I had no desire to be in a relationship with someone, or if I had no desire for romantic attraction at all, I would probably bring that up more. Or, for instance, I'm trans, and I do identify as gay, so I only like men, right? However, I think that if I was a cis woman, right, and I definitely want children, for example, I think that if I was a cis woman, I would probably bring up being asexual more, because I don't have a desire for biological children.
Mm-hmm.
And if I was a cis woman, I might, and I think the part of the reason I'd have no desire for biological children is because of the transness and also because of the aceness. Like, I think that's part of the reason. But I think that if I was a cis woman, I would probably bring it up a little bit more because people might ask questions like, oh, why are you going down this route instead of having biological children? And while most people, in my life at least, not a lot of people's lives, sadly, but in my life at least, if I said, oh, I just don't want children, or I just don't want biological children, most people would just be like, yeah, okay, because that's the community I'm in.
Mm.
However, I think a lot of people's situation, it would be like, no, you'll change your mind. And that's devastating.
I can definitely say that my folks, when I first told them, hey, I'm ace and then arrow, they had all sorts of questions and said, how do you know? What if you just haven't found the right person yet? And I just wanted to pull my hair up and be like, it's been, 30 plus years. How long do I have to wait before you'll respect this fact? And, given that I'm also aromantic, I can very much say that I've been playing this game of use school as an excuse with my grandparents as to when I'm going to get into a relationship. Because I have not told any of my extended family that I'm ace or arrow. And actually, none of my family, other than my brother, knows that I am non-binary. I don't feel comfortable telling them that because of the way that they reacted when I told them about my asexuality and aromanticism.
I feel very lucky sometimes because I've never had a particularly hostile reaction to a coming out with anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Any of the coming outs that I've done, it's mostly been confusion
Mm-hmm.
and not hostility.
Mm-hmm. And I think,
Like when I came out as plural to my mom, and she was like, "Oh, is it a serial killer?" Because apparently that's the only thing people know about DID is that alters are serial killers.
Unfortunately, the media has some really, really bad representation.
But like the asexuality thing, it's mostly just been confusion.
Yeah.
Maybe a bit of upset rhetoric from my parents because they want kids and they're not getting any.
Absolutely.
They're not getting any. One of their sons is ace and the other one's a douchebag, so they're not getting kids.
So valid. And I think, it was confusion with my my mom and stepdad. Unfortunately, the way that they brought it up was very invalidating, and that's what bothered me. And I absolutely agree. Both Oozworm and Petito Nico are absolutely awesome. And if you haven't subscribed to them, well, go do it right now. Sorry,
shucks.
follow.
Aw, shucks.
The only non like North American person here being like, "Oh man, ah shucks,
Aw, jeez.
oh jeez." But yeah, in terms of my like local community, my parents don't really care too much. I think I always found it very strange in like American TV and stuff. And obviously this isn't just American TV. It's just that my brain kind of associates America and Canada with each other, but I think it's just the accent. But in a lot of TV, it's a lot of parents and grandparents being like, "Oh, when are you going to find a nice man?" And I was always like, that's very strange because my family has never done that. But part of that could be, for instance, like my mum's family. My uncle was single his entire 80 years of life. Like he never dated anybody. He lived with his sister, and she died, and he got sad, and then he never dated anybody, and he was fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that part of it, like my family just genuinely does not care. Like if you get into a relationship, amazing, that's great. But if you don't get into a relationship, okay, we're gonna ask you about something else to do with your life. Or like, for instance, yeah, they will always find something to ask about.
They always do. They always
Yeah.
do.
But
Honestly, at this point, I feel like my parents would be happy if I just did anything. Forget relationships, just anything.
Yeah,
well,
I
because
know.
like I phone my parents fairly regularly, and my parents don't care if I get into a relationship. Although I think that my parents would love if I got into a relationship, not because they want me to be in a relationship, but because they want me to just do something. Like, please just do something. Like when I was in high school, my parents were like, please go to a party. please go to a party. And I was like, why do you want me to go to a party? And they were like, your brother had been to so many parties. Please go to a party. I'm begging you. And I was like, you should be happy. I'm not going out. I'm not drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, listen, you and I both know that even if you did go to a party, you would not be drinking. I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right, but still.
Yeah. Hugster
But
Duke mentioned. Oh, sorry.
No.
I was just going
What
to
did
say,
you
Hugster
say?
Duke mentioned, I'm the second of four, and all three of my siblings are married with kids. I'm the only one who's single and ace. Um, I could see that being, that people might be, wondering why that is for sure. And, my brother's now, married himself. And so I think, initially, my parents were just, hoping slash expecting, the grandchild to come from me. And now they've kind of accepted it, but my mom still worries that, I'll be lonely if I don't get in a relationship. And I'm like, Mom, there's completely other ways to not be lonely. Like, I have awesome community around me. I'm involved in a local organization. I run Ace and Arrow discussion groups. I am in so many Ace communities online. I am not lonely. This is what I want.
You have a podcast now.
I have a podcast too, exactly. And also being as an only child, I can imagine that would be very tough, being, under a microscope. And probably, there's I mean, I can't speak for your parents, but I can maybe assume that they're hoping for grandkids at one point. So yeah, that I could see that being very difficult for sure.
See, my parents always I think a lot of my parents' outlook has been helped by the fact that I'm very different. Just in every way. Like, I'm autistic. I have ADHD. I've always been a little bit odd, and I've never been interested in a lot of stuff. So I think that my parents just kind of assumed that, like, they didn't even want me to be normal. They just wanted me to do things, and they wanted me to have opportunities. And I think, like, yeah, because I think that my older brother, for example, I think that if my older brother came out as ace, my parents would be worried because my older brother has developed very typically, and my older brother has always presented as someone, and I 100% he's not ace. He likes women a lot, but like I think that if he were to come out as ace, my parents would be worried because he has always been like very social, has always been very like had that desire to have a partner and whatever.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I never displayed that ever. And so my parents, if I like speak to them about being asexual, they're like, yeah, okay, that's pretty normal for you. But that's because I'm a little bit atypical anyway.
I can relate also being ADHD myself, that I'm atypical in other ways for sure.
But yeah, all my parents want for me is to have like enough opportunity because of the fact that I did not have a lot of opportunity when I was younger due to not being diagnosed.
Yeah.
I think the only problem I have is sometimes my parents will bring up a relationship I had like 12 years ago with a woman with whom the relationship did not work out because I couldn't have sex.
Mm-hmm.
Due
At the
to not
time, we
being
didn't know what that was about, but
See, I've never been in a relationship, so my parents are just happy. My parents are like, great, amazing. Do
see,
what
I
you
should have
like.
thought of that. That would have made things way easier if I had just never bothered.
See, but my issue is that I want a relationship.
Same, but sometimes it's not worth the trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I
That
will
actually
say,
segues
yeah,
into the next one.
It does.
and that is representation in media, you're thinking?
Sex positivity. Right.
Sex
Oh, yeah,
positivity.
sex positivity, exactly.
And favorability.
And favorability. So this is often confused in society, and I have definitely made that confusion myself. I've conflated the two. Sex positivity is, I believe, let me know if I've got this wrong, is, people should, be, allowed to have sex. You know, you're whereas, you know, sex, I always conflate these two. I'm going to bring up the definitions so I don't get into trouble here.
Yeah.
No, you're getting it right.
positivity-
You're getting it right.
Yeah, sex positivity relates to your own opinion on sex and it's
Yeah.
like placed in society.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, sex favorability has to do with sex in relation to yourself.
exactly. That's a really good way of putting
And you
it.
could be, and you can be, in response to like sex favorability, you could be sex averse
Yeah.
and not be sex repulsed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because like, yeah, because like you could maybe avoid sexual situations, but without being repulsed by sexual situations.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's because a lot of people, if they have no desire to have sex, they will think that that automatically means that they're sex repulsed.
No.
But that's not what that means.
No.
I mean, like you
No.
can call yourself sex repulsed if you want to. Like, do what you
Well, so
like.
I'm sex
But,
repulsed,
like,
but not sex
yeah.
averse, which is a very strange needle to thread.
Mhm.
Because like I don't want any sexual things happening involving myself ever, but also I don't care what everyone else is doing around me. Like there's some people who like if they see any sex depicted anywhere that they don't enjoy that, I don't really care.
Yeah.
I'll send you a I'll send you a graphic, Ty.
All right. That's that'll be helpful. Thank you. Oh yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
We put
So
that
on the left
screen.
hand is like, on the left hand is like sex positivity. On the right hand is sex favorability.
Yep.
Okay, let me actually put this on the screen because that's a really good infographic. And it's from the is that the Ace World of Tumblr?
I can give it a check.
Where should we put this? I'll have to cover
You just cover my face. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine. No one needs to look
Goodbye,
at me.
ooze. No more ooze.
Ah, story of my life.
So yeah, sex positive. You have a positive attitude towards sex in general, but that's not necessarily for yourself. But you are perfectly happy and encourage people to have sex should they wish. Sex neutral is you have no particular opinion, either negative or positive, on sex in general. And sex negative, sex negativity is you have a negative attitude towards sex in general. And then there's sex favorability. Sex favorable means that you yourself have a positive attitude for sex for yourself. You desire to desire sex. Sex indifferent is like, I don't really care either way. Sex averse is you tend to have a negative attitude towards sex for yourself. You don't desire it. And sex repulsed is you're completely repulsed by the thought of sex.
For yourself.
For yourself, exactly. So the sex favorability is for you. Sex positivity is the concept in general.
Yeah, I feel a lot of people get confused about sex repulsion and the difference between that and sex aversion.
Yeah.
As someone who is sex repulsed, I can tell you that when they say repulsed, it is like legitimately every time I've attempted any sexual activity in my life, my body goes into fight or flight mode.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the level that it's at. I literally cannot, even if I wanted to, I cannot have sex.
Yeah.
And then there's also like, you could be the most sex favorable person. Like you could want to have sex a lot, and you could still be ace. It just means that you don't have that attraction towards
Exactly. Exactly.
Like you could still have sex without feeling that attraction towards someone. Like people do that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about attraction, not action, as we've said many times.
Because because people can still, people don't really understand that for some reason.
It's a huge problem. Yeah, people don't understand it.
Because like I know a lot of people are very like reciprocal in their feelings to do with it. So for instance, like So, for instance, I would be like neutral to favorable, one of those, because like I really don't care.
Yeah.
I'm not averse to it. I
Mhm.
really don't care. If I had a partner that was like, "Hey, I really want that," I would be like, "Sure." Like I'm reciprocal. I'm like, "Sure, whatever you want." Um, but I do think that part of the misconceptions around aceness is the confusion between like libido and attraction, which is similar to like sex favorability.
Yeah.
Because like you could have a high libido and still be ace.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think that sadly, a lot of like ace people who don't necessarily know any better, or who maybe do know better but they're trying to explain it to a layman, um, talk about how they have no desire to have sex, which doesn't necessarily apply to everyone, but I understand why they make that point.
Yes.
Because if you say obviously there's nuance to this situation, that makes sense to people who are ace. That
Yeah.
makes sense to people who are queer. However, if it's someone who has no exposure to this, I can understand coming at it from a viewpoint that they would understand.
Yes,
But I also
absolutely.
think that expanding that viewpoint should also be important.
Yes, and really getting at the fact that libido and attraction are two completely different things.
Yeah. Because like I do understand asexual people being like, as an asexual person, this is me quoting, like an asexual person being like, as an asexual person, I don't have a desire to have sex with people, because that is how a lot of people that's how a lot of people would explain sexual attraction, especially in relation to being gay or
Mhm.
in relation to being bi. That's understandable,
Yeah.
especially to people who aren't in the know.
Yeah. And I've
But
definitely
also
used
there's
to.
more nuance than that.
Yeah.
This
I
is why I always lead off conversations talking about asexuality with split attraction before I talk about anything else, because
yeah.
that to me is the most important point to make, because that's the thing most people haven't heard of
Mhm.
is split attraction. I literally one of my longtime friends, I saved her from a lifetime of horrible relationships because she had never heard of split attraction, and it turns out she is bisexual but heteroromantic. And so she had tried about 18 different times to have a romantic relationship with a woman, never worked a single time, and she was getting really depressed and mad about it. I was like, well, maybe you're just not romantically attracted to women. It was like a switch flipped, and now she's happy.
Absolutely.
So you have to, that's how I always lead off these conversations, because you get people to understand that their attractions are not just one block,
No,
but more like a pie chart with multiple different slices and nuance between them.
absolutely. And we are going to have a future podcast series specifically focusing on the split attraction model in much more detail. But it's really good to kind of bring it up as a little teaser. And remember that there's all sorts of different kinds of attraction out there. There's sexual attraction, romantic attraction, aesthetic attraction.
So you could be in a platonic
Yeah,
relationship, and
exactly.
you could be in a queer platonic relationship, and I'm not going to say too much about it because I know that you're going to have another future episode on this time. But in terms of like queer platonic relationships, you could be in a queer platonic relationship and you could have sex with that person,
Mhm.
but
'Cause-
that doesn't mean that you experience sexual attraction towards them. That means that you both happened to also want sex.
exactly.
That's fine.
Absolutely.
But I think that a lot of, especially asexual people, and also other like queer people, and especially neurodivergent queer people, have a different style of relationship
Hmm.
than like cis people do.
Hmm.
It's a lot like how you'll see in cis relationships or cis het relationships. It's like, oh, you can't be friends with the opposite sex. And I know that that's not all of them, that's just unhealthy ones. But you'll see that in like part of the socialization. It's like, oh, if they're friends with the opposite sex, they might cheat. And it's like, okay, but queer people, I can't imagine queer people doing that. But I'm sure it happens, but
Yeah,
I can't, yeah,
I definitely don't come across it nearly as much. That's for sure.
yeah.
If at
It's
all.
because we understand our own relationships better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And,
But yeah,
having,
because like, yeah.
I was just going to say that, having a QPP whom you have sex with, that's a very niche kind of situation that, you know, a cishet person will definitely not have any kind of concept about, and I could totally understand confusion there. But for folks in
Exactly.
the community, that definitely makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Well, because like you might still, yeah, or can and also we've spoken about this before a few times, but I'm just gonna reiterate: you can still want to have sex with someone who you don't feel attracted to.
Exactly.
You can
Exactly.
still want that, or like, yeah, because like there are people who are 100% asexual who still have sex with their partners. There are people who know that, like, let's say you're demisexual, right? You could be
Yeah.
demisexual and be in a romantic relationship, all like, and not have experienced the sexual attraction yet, right? But you might know it. You have the ability to develop it in
Exactly.
theory. So like, for instance, I'm something, but like if I was in a romantic relationship and I didn't know if I was experiencing sexual attraction to that person, I would probably still be like, yeah, sure, you know, like I don't care.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but Cat's same.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, you
I'm
both.
sorry.
I'm so sorry.
It does definitely happen in
It
queer
does. It
places.
totally does.
It does happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally does.
I was gonna say, like, you can want to have sex with someone without actually wanting to have sex with them. That's the whole agosexuality thing.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So if you could do that, then
And
sky's the limit.
actually, I have seen this with queer people in that, and I very rarely see this with like cishet people, where like queer couples will quite often talk about like people they find hot, like celebrities or whatever. I see that really often, where like a guy in a relationship with another guy will be like, haha, yeah, this celebrity's really hot, right? And that doesn't mean that they're going to go and have sex with that celebrity. That just means that they find them hot. And then, but then, for a lot of like cishet people, I don't hear them saying that.
Oh,
I hear a
I've
lot
heard
of
it.
like,
I don't
because
know.
they,
I
I've
mean,
heard it.
they have the whole hall pass thing that they have in straight relationships.
yeah, but that one, I don't understand that one.
I mean, I don't get it either, but it's like, oh, which celebrity would you allow me to
But
cheat on you
also,
with without getting mad about it?
but I'm also referring to like, for instance, like a passerby on the street. Like I know people who, if someone really hot walks past them on the street, they will immediately turn to each other and be like, "Hey, that person was really hot," and both of them will be like, "Yeah, that person was really hot."
Well, I've heard it
But I,
many times from cishet people.
but I've never heard that from cishet people. It might just be the different like
I
the
only hear
different
that from
environments they're
cishet
in.
people.
But like I very rarely hear that from cishet people who are in couples. So like a
Hmm.
girl saying that to her
Maybe not
boyfriend,
when they're
"Hey, I
with their
found this person."
partner. Maybe
Yes.
not
No, no,
when they're
no.
with their partner,
I'm
but
specifically referencing when they're with their partner.
okay.
Oh.
Because
Like
I have seen that from cishet people in
cause like
relationships. Like,
cause, but yeah, cause like I see it with like bisexual, like like for instance, I like know someone who is gay with a bisexual partner, right? Their partner is bisexual. If their partner sees a girl walking down the street that he finds hot, he'll be like, "Oh my god, she was really hot," and his boyfriend will be like, "Yeah, okay," just like fine with it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, with cishet couples, and I'm specifically referencing couples, I'm not referring to like
yes.
with your friends, with the boys, but like, meanwhile, cishet people, I think that would be a bit more frowned upon, maybe.
Maybe it's just because most of the people that I know are in good relationships.
Yeah.
Because I don't tend to make friends with toxic people.
Hmm.
But like I have seen that where like there will be a couple and they are cishet and a hot person will walk by and they'll both be like, damn.
Hmm. Absolutely. I've seen it.
Perhaps not the most common experience, but it happens.
See, I like
there's
that. I like that it happens.
absolutely. There's that
I think it
internet
shows that you're
meme.
secure. I think it shows that you're secure.
Absolutely.
Like one of my favorite movies showed someone having a crush on the boy in the main relationship, like a new character coming in and having a crush, and it was their first ever crush. Um, and the boy was completely oblivious, and his girlfriend was like, "Oh my god, they have a crush on you. That's so cute." And then the boy was like, "What should I do? Should I like stop hanging out with them immediately because they have a crush on me?" And the girl was like, "No, Because, like, they're gonna get over this crush as long as you just don't reciprocate it, which I know that you're not going to because you're not a cheater. It's fine. Just keep hanging out with them. Like, don't let their first crush experience be a bad one. Let them get over it manually. And I'm like, I'm so glad that this movie has allowed to see, instead of her immediately getting jealous and being like, no, this person's trying to steal my man and I don't trust him. Meanwhile, it's like, no, you can just be like, oh my god, they have a crush on you, that's so cute. You know, like, you can be secure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it differs obviously in the relationship, but I do 100% I do 100% agree. And you know, if you're in a healthy relationship, I can totally see, you know, why would it? I mean, I guess I'm saying this from an ace perspective. Why would it bother you? I guess I don't know.
Hmm.
Not sure where I'm
Like,
going
I
with
can
that.
These are
understand when it
things we
comes from
can't
trauma.
understand sometimes.
I can
Yeah.
understand it when it comes from trauma, right?
Yeah.
Like, when it comes from trauma, I feel like that's a thing, but that then is a thing to work on. That's not like just a blanket like thing that should happen.
Yeah.
However, I think that immediately distrusting your partner around like someone who you know likes them or whatever, it's like, no, just have a conversation. Like, if you're uncomfortable with
Yeah.
this person, like for instance, if this person is like really like touchy-feely with your partner or whatever,
Yes.
if you're uncomfortable with that,
Yes.
then maybe you can talk to your partner, because maybe this is your partner's best friend and they had no idea that it was weird. Because like, I mean, I know that some of it should be like common sense or whatever, but also a lot of it isn't common sense. People don't
No.
know this stuff.
No.
So like, if like maybe the partner didn't know that this was weird and nobody's mentioned it to them, and if you say, hey, it's really weird, most girls wouldn't do this with like their best friend who's a guy,
Yeah.
the partner might go, oh, it was making me uncomfortable, but I didn't want to push my best friend away.
Yeah. And communication in any relationship is key. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can't have a relationship of any kind that, you know, without proper communication.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you can, but it's not going to
You
be a good
can.
one.
It's just
It's not a
it's
good
not a
one.
just
healthy
how
relationship.
it's how a lot of cishet people have relationships, and
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
that's not good.
And also, a lot of cishet people don't like their partners, which is just really wild to me.
Also true.
Like, what do you mean you're angry that your wife is making you stay home from golfing to look after your children? Like, that's your job.
We can. That's a whole podcast.
That's a whole
unto,
yeah.
That's
unto its
that's
own.
that's a whole series of podcasts
Yeah.
Mhm.
with a accompanying novella.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a big topic for sure. All right. I think, you know, it's been close to 2 hours here. I might take a quick break here, go grab some water, and
Not
we'll
a
come
bad
back.
idea.
We'll come back in a few minutes and talk about representation in media. Does that sound
Hey.
good?
Yep.
All right. Welcome back, folks.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
So, a topic that's certainly, I think, an important one to discuss is the representation of asexuality in mainstream media, which I know has been problematic for many, many years. And I've got, you know, a few examples I can certainly talk about from my own experience. But why do you think why has it taken so long for mainstream media to include any representation of asexuality? And if it does, especially those experiences which are not your Sheldon Cooper Arrow Ace experience?
I do want to say, we see it as well with gay people, because there's, and like we see it, we see it a bit less often now with queer people or like gay people in general, due to the fact that there are more like gay people out and about, and there are shows that can be focused on like gay people as a culture.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of like gay people have their own kind of they have their own kind of subcultures.
Yeah.
But we also do see it with gay people in mainstream media that is not focused on them.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the time, a show will only have one gay person, or they will have two gay people, and they are a couple.
Mm-hmm.
And in order for there to be a third gay person to come in, one of that couple's got to go. Otherwise, it's too many gay people.
Yeah.
So I do think that part of the reason why we don't see it as much is, I mean, partially because it's not as well known, but also because we're still trying to get gay people accepted into
Yeah.
it.
That's
So
so
yeah.
valid. Yeah.
Yeah, ace people at this point are kind of one of those things where it's someone has to be specifically looking out to put an ace person in their show.
Yeah.
Because they've only just caught up with gay people. It reminds me of like the '90s when people just started having shows where they would always have one person in a wheelchair.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, this is our disability representation. We got a person in a wheelchair for some reason
Yeah.
in the show every single time. And now people are kind of starting to do that with ace people. Like, yeah, here's some representation. At least that's what it feels like to me sometimes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, because with gay people, for example, even a lot of shows that have just a few gay characters, if you have more than a few gay characters, and they are main characters or main recurring,
Mm-hmm.
so you know what I mean, they're recurring regularly enough that you see them regularly, it suddenly becomes a quote unquote queer show.
Yeah.
And it's great that it would be a queer show. However, that's not what a queer show is.
No.
A queer show is a show that is focused on queer people.
Yeah.
It shouldn't your only if your only exposure to quote unquote queer media is through the two queer characters in the TV show you watch, then the TV show you watch isn't a queer show, it's a show that happens to have queer people in it.
Yeah.
And the shows that happen to have queer people in it are fine and are good. However, I see far too often that they get conflated with each other. And it's you get your Heartstopper or your Sex Education. That's another one that a lot of people see because it had a main queer character. And those are important and those are good and we should keep having those. But also, just because that show had a queer side character, it's not the same.
Yeah.
We should be working to put more queer representation into those shows that happen to have one queer character without labeling them a queer show. Because as soon as it gets labeled a queer show, then nobody's getting exposed to it because it's considered quote unquote woke, and I hate that word, but it's fine.
Don't get me started on that one.
Yeah.
Ace people are one of those where there's a lot of not openly ace characters, but ace coded in the same way that people used to be queer coded in the 90s and aughts in these shows. And so I feel like 90% of ace representation is just characters that everyone just kind of assumes are ace.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Absolutely.
never say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can name a couple of actually open and out asexual characters in any media ever. But then we have characters like Jessica Rabbit, who everyone's like, yeah, she's ace. Or you're talking about Sheldon Cooper.
Yeah.
Who I don't watch that show, so I don't know anything about him, but fair enough, I could believe it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's mainstream media struggles with is, in order to outright code somebody as some sort of sexuality, there has to be a relationship involved, or you can't clearly describe their orientation. And I think many ace and obviously aro relationships are not the same types of relationships as cishet people have, and so therefore it may be difficult to get that nuance in there. And I think that partly has been the struggle for mainstream media as well.
That's why everyone thinks Jessica Rabbit's ace.
Yeah.
Is because every time someone asks her why she's with Roger Rabbit, she's like, he makes me laugh. That's the reason. What more do you need?
Yeah.
There's some reps that I really enjoyed, and I do think that, like, for instance, soap operas are very good at. The thing is there's still a way to go with like soap operas. However, I do think that soap operas and stuff like that do kind of often pave the way for representation. So for instance, a lot of soap operas were like the first gay kiss, the first, like the first queer relationship, the first character to say I'm gay. And like there's one soap opera in the UK called Emmerdale, that's really big, and it's set in like a rural town in like Yorkshire or something. I don't know. And it had the first asexual character in a UK TV show.
Wow, that's amazing.
And she was in a romantic relationship. So it was, and that's a great piece of representation because she even goes on to explain it. And her older brother is gay. And her older brother was like a trailblazer for like gay people at the time because he came out in like 2011.
Yeah.
So you got to see like her older brother, who is kind of older gay, older queer, and you get to see him reacting to his little sister going, I'm asexual, and him going, what does that mean? And her explaining it to him, and she even, in the conversation, she gets to explain that like you can still have that attraction, and you, because he even says like, don't you have a boyfriend? And I love when shows they provide that bit of like exposition, because I understand that we shouldn't have to have that exposition, but also it's very helpful for viewers who don't know any better. Because her brother's like, oh, don't you have a boyfriend? And she goes, I've done research. I can still have a boyfriend and I can still experience romantic attraction, and my boyfriend gets me and he understands that. And I was like, that's great. That's great representation.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's that and Todd from BoJack. That's
Oh yeah,
the
I
bit
was
of
about to
representation we have. That's it.
Yeah, I was about to say, Todd from BoJack Horseman, and especially that, whole, episode or two where Todd develops the ace dating app and really saying, hey, look, there are ace folks for whom, dating is something they want. They want to be in a relationship. They want to be in a capital R relationship, not, a platonic one. And prior to that, it was any person you could potentially code as ace was arrow ace and didn't want anything to do with anyone.
And a lot of the time it's lack of emotion. They're aliens and robots.
Exactly.
Those are the ace people. Aliens and robots. So you got Spock from Star Trek. You've got Data from Star Trek. You've got and they're or they're like weird. So like we've said Sheldon Cooper.
Yeah.
But you get so much other things, or it's things that are seen to be like, how do I put this in like, I'm just gonna say like it's things that are perceived to be like devoid of sex because of another reason. So for instance, one of those examples are SpongeBob, right? SpongeBob is canonically asexual. In theory, it's great. However, he's an adult who acts like a child. And I think that's part of the reason why he's asexual. The reason why he's asexual isn't because he just happens to be asexual. No, the reason why he's asexual is because he acts like a child.
Yeah.
And I do think that that's why the creator has like seen it that way. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like you can be asexual and you can be like that. However, I think part of it is just he's not he doesn't have that desire because he acts like a child and because he's childish.
Yeah. That is so valid. That's a really good point I hadn't even thought of, to be honest.
And like, yeah. Because like that's not a reason, but I do think that's why, is because it's not because he's asexual because he happens to be. He's asexual because he's not a sexual being.
And
because he's a sponge. Yeah.
Because
sponge who acts like a child.
Yeah, he's a sponge who acts like a child. Meanwhile, it's like you could have made it in like, oh, he could still experience that or like whatever. However, it was I'm trying to like I'm trying to be very careful with my wording, but I don't know how
Yeah.
to. Yeah.
I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
W-
But I
one of
think
the
a lot
nice
of it
things
is
is
like
what?
childishness.
One of the nice
And-
things is we very rarely get bad ace representation because it's usually just no ace representation.
Yeah.
Like I can, in the same way that I can only think of a couple examples of actually ace characters, things I can only think of like one example off the top of my head of like
Yeah.
something that very poorly represented ace people,
Yeah.
which is just that one episode of House.
Yeah.
Oh,
But past that, I can't think of anything else really because usually we just don't get mentioned at all.
so true. So true. And Duke brought up a really good point. So in the comic books, Jughead, I think, has canonically been coded as Arrow Ace. And in Riverdale, they, did not even push for the character to be Ace, like in the comics. And that's been a big, that's been really unfortunate. Though that comes back to the whole argument that do all Ace characters have to be Arrow Ace? And so, I have problems with, mainstream media just portraying everybody as Arrow Ace.
And also, I want to say, in terms of comics, DC Comics has got a lot of like good pride representation. It's a lot of like the children of the originals. So, for instance, you have John Kent, son of Clark Kent, is bisexual, and I do have a slight problem with them making them automatically bisexual because it's good that they're bi. However, I do think that part of the reason why they've made them bisexual is one, because I think a couple of these characters have previously had girlfriends, and two, because they want to be able to fall back on the fact that they like girls. And I don't think that that's like. I think it's okay to acknowledge that they are bi. It's fine for them to be bi. That's good. Bi representation, we need it. But also, I think that part of the reason why they make so many characters bi is so that they can fall back on that when they're tired of them having a boyfriend.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, but I know that, like, for instance, one of the Robins is bi, and then, like, Superman's son, who is also Superman, which gets real confusing, but sure. He's bi. And then Green Arrow's son is Ace.
I didn't realize that.
Marvel also has Gwenpool. Not that she's a very popular character, but she is canonically Ace. Arrow Ace at that.
I have. It's been a minute since I followed any of the Marvel movies after my concussion in 2018.
Oh, she's not in the movies. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
It's comics only for her.
Yeah. After my concussion in 2018, unfortunately, I kind of stopped watching many of the series because I had to basically take a year away from the screen, and it's the reason why I wear the purple glasses to this day. So I've kind of gotten out of tune with a lot of the Marvel and DC kind of series.
Honestly, I'm not a big media consumer in general.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really watch movies. I don't really watch TV. I don't read comics. Most of the entertainment I get is internet based.
Yeah.
So the fact I know anything is kind of a miracle.
So
I do want
valid.
to say, one of the issues with representation is that to have like gay characters or even like bi characters, you can just show them with a partner of the same gender.
Yes.
And like obviously, I still think that the word gay should be used and the word bi should be used to describe them. And I think that they should do that more often explicitly in the media. However, in order to like code it without explicitly saying it, it's pretty easy to do. Meanwhile, with ace characters, and to some degree trans characters, especially if they're adult trans characters, like I'm not referring to like seeing them grow up or whatever, but like if it's an adult who's like, you only ever see them in like their 30s, right? They could be a trans man who considers themselves fully transitioned and who might not do anything, but you kind of have to explicitly take the time to tell the reader. And it's the same thing with ace people. You have to take that time because if it's someone who just happens to not have a partner,
Exactly.
then it's a lot harder to assume, because sometimes them not having a partner, it could be that like sometimes people will jump down the throat of like, oh, that means they could be gay
Hmm.
because they're not, and they could be, or they could be bi, or they might just not, or they might be ace, or they might just not want a relationship and not be any of those things.
That's
So
so
it's
true.
very hard to do that. So we
Yeah.
need to
Yeah, it's called the visible orientation for a reason, and it's difficult, as you said, to code asexuality in when usually the way that we code a character is based on the kind of relationship, and on top of that, the capital R relationship that they have.
Yeah, and that's also why I think that you get the ace aliens and ace robots, is because it's very easy for a robot to be like, I do not have that, right?
Hmm.
I do not have the relationships in the same way that you humans have relationships.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, most human beings wouldn't say that. Like, even if they
no.
were ace, most human beings wouldn't be like, I do not have that type of relationship that you people have. They might just be like, oh, I'm ace, or oh, I'm not interested in that.
Hmm.
Because
Exactly.
I know a lot of people who identify as ace who don't say that they are ace explicitly to anybody. They will just say, "Oh, I'm not interested in a relationship."
Yeah, and that's perfectly
That's easier
valid.
to do.
Yeah,
Cause it's easier.
By quite some margin, it's easier to do that.
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, moving on from mainstream media, do you know of any media, not necessarily mainstream, that has good ace representation? That would be, interesting to share. Books or
Dimension 20.
yes, I've definitely heard of
Yeah.
that. I haven't had a chance to check it out.
I feel like there's just like a zillion different Twitch streamers and YouTube shows and
This really great
whatnot.
streamer
As
called
long as you
Tai
know these,
Wai.
yeah. This you ever heard of them? I've heard of them.
Yeah, you should
I
go
missed
and
what it
check them
was.
out. Give them a follow. This
What was
great
the
Twitch streamer called Tai Wai. Don't know if you've heard of them.
you got me there.
That's good ace rep right there.
Yes.
And then if you want some bad ace rep and you want a bad ace influence, you come to me. I'm gonna teach.
Are we like the middle ground then between the two of you? Like
Yeah,
we're
sure.
the okay ace rep.
Yeah, you're just okay.
Mediocre white man strikes again in new and innovative ways every fucking day.
Wild Sage mentioned Alice Osman and Claire Kahn, and I think Alice Osman wrote a book called Loveless, and it's a novel about
Mhm.
an arrow ace experience, I believe, which
Yes.
I've heard a lot of people talk about. I have unfortunately haven't had a chance to read it myself, but it depicts the I guess the character Georgia as she begins university, depicting her journey of self-discovery as an arrow ace individual, and has received quite positive literary reception. It's something I do want to check out at some point for sure. Another good one.
There's the Claire Kahn is the other good one, or do you have another?
Oh, I was going to say Angela Chen Ace, the book, is really good as well. Talks about a lot of different ace experiences from a whole bunch of different perspectives.
Because I was going to say I would like one thing that I'd like to see more in ace representation in media is just people who are like older and
Yes.
have been ace for a while, because I'm
Yes.
sick of ace coming out stories, because that's all that they
Yes.
are.
Yes.
It's 80% of the ace stuff we ever see.
And also, I've heard from a lot of people, and I really agree with this, is that writing an ace character will inevitably lead to stereotypes. But if you write a character who happens to be ace, then it's a lot
Yes.
easier to stop falling into stereotypes. Because if you go into it specifically aiming to write an asexual character, it's like, okay, what are their motivations? How exactly do they feel about their sexuality? Because if you go into it specifically aiming to write an asexual character, a lot of the time that
Yes.
ends up with you specifically thinking about sex repulsed asexual who is a bit of a
Ace.
robot.
Yeah.
I see
An
that on
arrow
like
ace.
I see that on Tumblr and stuff all the time, where people are, they're like, I would like to put ace rep in the book I'm writing. How do I write an ace character? I'm like, write
Just
a fucking character and
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like
then make him ace.
yeah,
Yeah.
like as a writer who like I write a lot of D&D stuff and I do other stuff, but I would much prefer people start with just a character and stop defining characters by who they are in a relationship with, right? I don't think of my characters as, oh, I'm going to write a gay character. I'm going to write this character. Oh, this character happens to have a partner in the next city. Okay, this partner is a man, right? I don't go out writing a gay character. I go out writing a character and then he happens to be gay. Or,
Exactly.
like it's none of yeah. But for some reason, a lot of the time when people end up writing an ace character, they end up within that. The main character has to find out that they are asexual, and usually that is some scene where the main character's like, "So, do you have a boyfriend?" And it's like, "No, I don't engage in dirty, dirty sex. I would never do that."
You bring up such a good point. I was a reviewer for a book, I think in 2022. Forget the name of it, but they had really good ace representation in it. They actually it had really good queer representation as a whole. But what I really liked about it is the main character happened to be ace, but that wasn't the main focus of the book. It just happened to be that the main character was ace, and I really liked that. So that's a really good point. The whole focus wasn't their ace identity, it just happened to be they were a person who happened to be ace. So that's a good point.
Mhm.
That's how most ace people are in real life.
Exactly.
We're all just folks who happen to be ace.
Yeah.
Actually, I make my whole life about being ace. Actually, I walk into a room and gosh darn it, everybody will know.
I walk into a room and the sex is just out,
Uh-huh.
just gone.
I in fact leech all of the sexual energy out of the room.
Yeah, that's what keeps us young.
Yeah.
So maybe for the sake of time,
Mhm.
we want to skip the fourth question and move on to memes, or what do you want to do?
Given I've never really used AVEN, we might skip the fourth one
Yeah,
because
why
I
don't we
won't
go
have much
ahead?
to say on that.
Yeah.
So we can
And we already
move on to the memes.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think we already sort of briefly mentioned what it is, anyways. So
Yeah.
Let's.
I mean, if you want good ace spaces on Discord,
Oh yeah,
we
there's
know
tons.
of some.
There are tons of ace spaces on Discord. I'm in about 13 different ones, I think, currently. And that's been a big part of my ace space has been online in Discord.
Really,
sure.
just go anywhere except for the asexuality Reddit, and you'll probably be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't go there.
See, I'm actually not in a lot of ace spaces. Not by choice, but just because I tend to surround myself with like a lot of queer people of like all persuasions or whatever, and I tend to be in the same places as my online friends are. And some of my online friends are Ace, hello, Ty, and Ooze.
Hello.
but like some of the people I know are Ace. However, I noticed that a lot of the people I'm interacting with aren't necessarily Ace.
Yeah.
And like I do like bringing, because I've been in a lot of queer spaces and not necessarily a lot of ace spaces specifically.
Yeah.
I like to bring those points because I identified as queer for a long time before I ever started identifying as ace. I am very good at bringing in those talking points into those other queer spaces. But
So
yeah.
valid. Yeah.
I've got an issue where I don't fit into a lot of ace spaces, which is its own kind of problem.
Mm.
Just because I mean, like I'm a very brash, loud kind of guy, and a lot of these spaces are very, I am neurodivergent, but in a different neurodivergent way than a lot of other people.
Mhm.
Yeah. That is valid.
So it is nice finding places where I can hang.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think you're just great, Ooze.
Well,
Absolutely.
thank
It's
you.
been such a pleasure
I
hanging out with you.
appreciate you both.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Ace memes.
Ace memes. Finally, the meme archaeologist gets a chance to shine.
Yeah.
That's what they call me on TikTok. It's the meme archaeologist. I have a show on TikTok where I talk about like old memes from like the 2000s.
Ah, yes. I like
And
to
so
pull up,
I've been dubbed the meme archaeologist.
I like to pull up really random, obscure references from the 1990s as well.
I mean that's its own thing. That's just nostalgic references. I'm talking like 4chan memes.
Oh yeah.
I can't do memes from the 1990s. That's not nostalgia to me. I wasn't born in the
Yeah,
1990s. That's retro for Nico.
that's retro. I mean, it's retro for us too. No matter how many people my age, I keep saying, but the 90s were 10 years ago. No.
No.
Shut up. They weren't. They're old. We're old.
Yeah.
It's fine.
They're over 30.
Age
1990s.
gracefully, damn it.
Yeah. 30 years ago. Try 30. So,
Twitch is good social media, Huckster.
it is. It totally is.
It's probably my favorite social media.
I would agree. It's been absolutely awesome. I've met so many fantastic people on Twitch. Obviously, both of you through the Ace and Arrow raid train. Lots and lots of really awesome people through Twitch. And I think that's actually one of the spaces that first got me thinking about asexuality in the first place was Twitch. And then I moved on to kind of the Discord spaces after that.
It sounds really nice not having started on Tumblr.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty cool. I wish I'd done that.
I somehow skipped that altogether.
Yeah. Well, honestly, talking about Ace Memes is going to be easier than I thought it was going to.
Yeah.
When we first broached the topic, because I was like, surely there's a lot, but like half of them are just
Obscure.
X is better than
Yeah.
sex.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the big one I think that most people would recognize is the garlic bread meme.
Oh,
That
yeah.
very much follows that. So, as
The
an
cake one is also a similar thing. Though you mentioned you thought the AVN gave.
Yeah.
There was
so
a joke with them
think,
with cake specifically.
Yeah. So I think where the cake, obviously, it's got a connotation that cake's better than sex, but I think the other part is that you're given a piece of cake as a metaphor to being welcomed into the ace space when you first enter Avon. So I think it's got a dual purpose.
The being given cake was slightly after it. However, also it's twofold. Avon was kind of in the middle. Like Avon making cake kind of an unofficial symbol of aceness was in between people being like cake is better than sex. But it was before it got like really popular and like really skyrocketed. So it kind of started off as like, oh, cake is better than sex, and then Avon was like, haha, that's a fun joke, and then they like made that an unofficial symbol, and then it got really popular to be like cake is better than sex.
That makes sense. I remember seeing on I think an LRT in Vancouver actually a reference to a CBC show, and it was for those that like cake more than they do sex, and I was surprised to see that on an ad in a transit system.
I mean, that's a joke that straight people have been using for a long time. Like you'll go online, look for recipes, and you'll find better than sex brownies.
Yeah, but this had
better than sex anything.
This had a very queer or ace feel to it, given that they were specifically referring to cake. And
Good, we're
maybe I'm just,
stealthily invading their
Yeah.
advertisements.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
the thing with, and then the garlic bread thing was from a post that someone went, yeah, sex is great, but have you ever had garlic bread? And then it just skyrocketed from that.
Absolutely, and I would
It's a-
agree that garlic bread is amazing. And I am in a local ACE group at my university, and for the memes, we do have garlic bread meetups from time to time, which is
Mhm.
absolutely awesome.
Yeah. And then what else are ace memes? Unicorns. I've seen
Unicorn. Well,
unicorns quite
see,
a bit.
I've
Well,
heard the
unicorns.
unicorn thing, but I feel like that one's never really caught on with things. The dragon
No.
thing has been a lot more popular
Yeah.
than
Well, the
unicorns.
thing
Yeah.
is I think that the unicorn thing kind of spread from like ace people being quote unquote like pure, and like, like
Really?
because
Because I thought
yeah.
it was from the
And
same
I was
place as
like,
the dragons. Like we're not real.
see, I think it's both. But I heard a lot of people being like, oh yeah, people think of asexuals people as like unicorns because they're meant to be like pure. And
See, that's
I was like, ew, that's gross.
because
Don't
that's
do that.
weird.
They're
Because
also not real.
bi people also get called unicorns, and by that logic, they would be doubly impure.
I think it's twofold.
It might be a twofold thing. I feel like the unicorn
Yeah.
thing didn't stick around just because that's a word
No.
that has a sexual connotation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, I feel like it makes more sense for us to do dragons. Although knowing what I do about the supposed origin of the dragon thing, it's not great.
Mhm.
The most common story I've found for the dragon thing isn't just obviously it's the ace people aren't real bit. So
Yeah.
you know, haha, we're dragons because dragons aren't real. We're not real. It was also a thing. It was a Harry Potter reference,
Oh,
Yes.
of course.
which is unfortunate
Yes.
because Charlie Weasley went to Romania to study dragons instead of going to college to have sex. That was the apparently there was a Tumblr post with that joke on it, and that might be another part of the whole Harry Potter, not Harry Potter thing, the whole dragon
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, there's no room for JKR here or Harry Potter in this channel. That's for sure.
I mean, he was the smartest character in Harry Potter because he got the fuck out.
Yeah, I mean that's a very good point. Just
Like,
get the fuck out of there.
I'm glad that the one ace character and his name's not Dave No Sex or something. What I assume J.K. Rowling would name an ace character.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I did not realize where that originated. I always was confused.
It's a theory. I don't know if it's
Yeah.
actually the place where it came, but I saw enough people saying that was the origin story for the dragon thing that I'm forced to believe that at least there's some credibility to it.
So
Yeah.
valid. Yeah,
If that's what that was, I was actually surprised looking around because there's not a lot of like culture wide ace memes.
No, it's.
I thought there'd be more. Honestly, it's just the garlic bread cake, that, and the Denmark thing.
Yeah, and the Denmark unfortunately has been co-opted for absolutely horrible, horrible.
It's fine. We already decided before we started
Yeah.
that we was changing to Australia.
Yeah.
We're gonna invade Australia. We're gonna rename it to Australia, and we're gonna team up with the emus and kill all of them.
I'm a dinosaur. Maybe I can communicate with them.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to say the plans out loud. My bad. Delete that part of the VOD.
Nah, it's okay. They won't watch this far. They're aphobic, ooze.
That's right.
They're not gonna sit through this.
New stereotype just dropped. All Australians are aphobes. Screwed up if true.
I mean, if they weren't aphobes, then why won't they just hand it to us, huh?
In fairness, we haven't asked. They might just hand it over if we just ask.
Maybe if we just ask really nicely. If we say pretty please.
That's probably how that works.
Quartzy called me Aussie the other day. It was really sad.
Really?
Oh.
She was talking about like a presidential person, and she was like, Nico, I know you won't get this as an Aussie. And I was like,
Hmm.
what do you mean as an
Oh.
Aussie? What do you mean as an Aussie? Do I sound Australian?
I will say your accent's a little vague, but it's definitely not Australian.
No, no.
I don't know if I'd be able to point out Scotland when hearing your voice, but I
I
definitely
know,
wouldn't
I
guess
understand that.
Australia.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, cause like I don't have the I have an R sound. I say my R's. I can
Yeah.
roll my R's. I just don't do it because most Scottish people I know do not roll our R's unless we're talking like proper.
So Duke
Although
asked, do any of them confuse asexuality with abstinence and celibacy? Well, I mean, the whole...
our memes don't do that.
Yeah,
So some people who don't like ace people probably have memes like
Yeah.
that, but like the ones that we make for ourselves, we certainly don't do
No.
that. And I don't keep up at all with ace memes made by aphobes.
yeah. And that's very valid, and why would you?
although the thing is I do understand the like. I do want to say that like sex is great, but have you ever had garlic bread? I do want to say that that is kind of
I was
confusing
gonna
it,
say.
but it's not because there is people who like sex.
Yeah, yeah,
Like there is people who actively choose to enjoy sex and seek out sexual experiences.
yes.
But I don't think that it's not like a confusion thing. I think that it's just like a lot of ace people like this one.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. So that's a very good distinction for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's less of like this is misinformation or like this is confusing it, and more of like a lot of ace people have associated with this.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that brings us to the end here. This has been a wonderful, wonderful first episode of the A-Spec podcast series. And I've had a lot of fun. I hope both you, Ooze and Nico, have enjoyed this as much as I have. And we discussed a lot of really awesome stuff, really good participation from folks in the chat as well. And I can't wait for the next one.
Be there or be square.
Absolutely. Anything you'd like to say in closing?
Australia, we're coming for you.
Australia.
Australia, stay tuned.
All right. Thank you so much.
Got my eyes on you.